name is Sarah Rachel Scholl. Welcome to Fuck the Canon. Today I am joined by my dear friend,
Rukmini Girish.
And we are talking about The Miles Between Me by Toni Nealie, an amazing book of essays. And I'm so excited to talk with you about them today.
Glad to be here. Glad to do this.
Yay! So I love that you brought this book to me. I'm really grateful that you recommended it. And I think I made my notes in my notebook about it, and I think the very first page, she has the sentence that just wrecked me. My personal coordinates seem knocked off kilter. The solid self I thought I possessed became unformed. And it's rare that like the very first page of a book wrecks me like that. Can you tell me, how did you first come across this book?
Almost by coincidence, really.
Okay.
Toni graduated from the same grad program that I did a couple years before, but she was still teaching there. So she was around a fair bit, and I met her, and she was the first person who wasn't a professor I knew that had actually published a book.
Okay.
So I was like, great, I'll buy the book and support her, and I had little to no idea what it was about.
Yeah.
And it took forever to arrive, but it did, and I read it, and it that happens a lot. That sentence on the first page, so many other sentences throughout.
Yeah.
I don't underline a lot in books, but this is especially books that I'm just reading because. But this is one of those books where I was just reading it. I was like, I have to stop, and I have to like get up and go across the room and get a pencil right now.
Yeah.
Because I have to remember this sentence.
Can I put you on the spot? So if you can go through, can you think of like one of the best things that you underlined? Like one of the things that's one of your favorites?
Yeah. I mean, it's it's actually towards the end.
Okay.
If I can find it. Is this nostalgia the sickness of clinging to a candy-sweet past? It can leave your mouth with the cloying aftertaste of gum chewed too long.
Nostalgia. I don't know. I think part of why I know I connect to this book is because she frames it so much about her journey moving to America, to Chicago. And I know that you moved when you were young. I moved here from Philadelphia. It feels like, it's so funny, my journey feels so insignificant in comparison to both yours and Toni's, but just the way she describes nostalgia for home and feeling unmoored, unrooted, was just so amazingly resonant. I don't know, can you talk more about that for me? Like, what were the connections you felt in this book towards your own experience?
I think what resonated with me most was that, naturally, but there are plenty of writers that are good, and you know, their words are, you just sort of want to roll around in their words a little bit. I feel that every time I read this. But beyond that, what I really enjoyed was the complexity of the identities. That's what I resonated with the most the first time I read this, because I've read other books that evoke that same sense of nostalgia and describe it beautifully, and you know, all of that, and which is not to diminish the way that she does it,
right,
but the sheer complexity of moving in from an established life, moving from an established life to this brand new place and having to build a new life again. Because a lot of immigrant narratives, or at least the ones that I've read about or heard about, tend to be either kids or, you know, at least college age. Right. And there isn't a lot of moving that happens either within that span or like after that span. I moved within that span. I was 14. She moved after that span as like a young parent. And so the sort of complexity of that and the choice, it's a little different when you actively make the choice. And you could have lived just as good a life back in the place where you originally were.
Yeah.
And it's those sort of nuances and complexities that I really loved. And I think this was one of the first books about immigration that I read that really talks about and addresses those.
Yeah. And it was so interesting for me because I'm not an immigrant. This is the country I was born in. I am an American. But I can remember so clearly when we first moved to Chicago 4 years ago. We came here because Matt, was going to school.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no job. And I knew one person besides him. And I can remember it was the second full day we were here. He got a call and he had to get to school. It was sort of like a mistake in calendaring. And so I helped him sort of get ready and he left. And then I sort of stood in our tiny apartment in Evanston and looked at all the boxes and was like, this is my life now. My life is in boxes and all I have to do is unpack them and then figure everything else out. And I remember I had been so cocky. I was like, oh, I'm going to go to this new city. I'm going to take it by storm, we know how I am. And I remember that was the first moment I felt truly unmoored.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me, I think, a solid 6 months to sort of feel like I actually got my footing.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably another 6 months before I felt like I could call that place home. Which I love the section where she talks about home and, she asks her husband and her sons, like, what is home for you?
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember the moment when I sort of felt that footing come back was when Matt and I came back from Christmas and we'd gone home, and the joke is we used to do sort of like the East Coast gauntlet. We go to 3 different cities in 10 days. And I remember we got back to our apartment and it was like, oh, we're finally home. And realizing that like home was each other, home was the place where we're starting to build our lives, and knowing that we were always going to miss Philadelphia and always going to miss that life that we had, that was no longer ours, that we could go visit it, but that it never felt like home again, which is just not what I was expecting, And I think it seems like that was her experience as well, and I think it's also similar to knowing that her husband's coming for a contract, a 3-year contract. Matt had a 3-year school program, right? And so there was always that question of like, will we go back after?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Would you feel comfortable talking about your experience of coming here? How that experience was for you of feeling like leaving home, finding this new home here?
Yeah, definitely. It's not like I haven't talked to you about that before.
No, I know.
It was very different, and like if I'd read this book as a 16-year-old, I'd have had a very different reaction to it. I don't think I'd have appreciated it as much as I did at 20, something like that.
Sure.
Because at 14, it kind of just felt like an extended vacation for a really long time.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, naturally I was pretty upset about leaving my friends and my family. But also, I have cousins that were born and raised in Indiana, and I'd heard enough from them that this was just like an adventure.
Yeah.
I was very excited by, my high school's theater facilities and, that type of thing. Like, the entire reason my parents decided to move in the first place was because I was already interested in literature, in theater, and that kind of thing. And there are more opportunities to pursue that kind of stuff and make a living from it here.
Yeah.
As much as we talk about how underpaid we all are.
Boy, oh boy.
But yeah, I mean, it just felt like a grand old adventure for a very long time, and it was really only when I got to college, and I went to a small liberal arts college in a small Midwestern town, and just being immersed in that, and being, as far as I remember, the only Indian student on campus for probably the first couple of years.
Yeah.
that was when it sort of really hit me of, this is a place that I don't really belong. And it's been a bit of a journey since then, because growing up and forming an identity here, like maybe the best way to put it is that I know how to be an adult here now.
Sure.
And when I go back there, I don't know how to be an adult there, because I never had to learn the adult stuff of like managing a house and like this and that over there. So speaking of, feeling like this is home.
Yeah.
I just went back to India for a couple of weeks in October.
Yes.
And my first time coming back and feeling like this was home was now.
Really?
It was early November. I've been here for 11 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Can you, what was it like having that realization?
It was a little bit sad.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
Because for such a long time, I'm still sort of coming to terms with it a little bit, so I'm not the most eloquent and coherent about it. But for the longest time, it's like this was a great place, a fine place, a place where I've made a lot of good friends, have some family as well. But my roots felt like they were there. Because I have family I'm still really close to there. I still have a couple of really good friends there.
Yeah.
And so it was always like, here is great and here can be great, but there is where I really belong. And so to have to make that shift all of a sudden is honestly a little sad and disorienting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I remember when we came back, and I think, going back to that Christmas when we first came back after our gauntlet, feeling so relieved to be home. And then the next reaction was, oh wow, Philadelphia's not home anymore. And all of the implications that went along with that. I went to college in a different state, but I spent the rest of my life in Philadelphia. And knowing that place that I felt so connected to, where I knew all my roots were, where most of my family still is, wasn't a place where I felt like I could continue, that it was like, as an adult, with the career and the life that I have, it had to now be in this brand new city.
You talked about family.
Yeah.
And I also, one of the things that I love about this book is that family is another sort of core tenet. Like, she has so many different and complex identities, but such an important one is being a mother.
Yeah.
And like, she wrestles with being a wife and a trailing spouse and what that means. But some of the most beautiful writing in this, especially those last couple of essays about dropping her son off at college. Were just, my heart.
Yeah. And I can remember, I remember my mom drove me to college, so it was like a caravan. We had all of the stuff in my mom's car, driving up, and I remember the moment when she left me. And I went to school 5.5 hours away from home, so far enough away that she couldn't come visit for the weekend, which was important, but close that if I needed to get home I could. And I remember how alone I felt when she left my room. And then later, I remember hearing from her that she cried the entire way home. Like, the entire 5.5 hours, she just cried all the way home, leaving me there. And I think, I think it's an interesting thing that I wrestle with now as someone who's in her mid-30s and isn't a mother. Seeing all of the struggles and identities that she goes through, and that being part of why I'm still on the fence about motherhood myself. And I think knowing that the experience I had when I first moved here, I was sort of the house spouse. I didn't have a job yet, so it was my job to sort of take care of the house and do all the cooking and cleaning and laundry and that sort of thing while Matt was in school. And that having that become my identity. I love when she talks about she recognized how much she undervalued the work that she was doing, and like how much she wasn't expecting that. And I realized in that moment that I also undervalued it. That it isn't like we have to have clean clothes, we have to have food, right?
Yeah.
The bills have to be paid. But that because I wasn't out in the world making something of myself, I was doing less than I could be or should be.
Yeah.
And I think especially her experience of coming after having created this whole life in New Zealand it was just heart-wrenching. Was there a part of her talking about her kids that resonated with you the most?
The thing that always makes me laugh is, I probably won't be able to find it.
No, it's okay.
But it's the moment, I think it's in the essay on brownness, when she's in the bathtub with her son, and she says, well, what color do you think we are? And he's like, you're orange with blue spots, and I'm green with, purple stripes, or something like that. That was both so beautiful and so heartbreaking, because at the end of the day, it's just about the bond.
Yeah.
It's just about the bond. And family for her and for me has been such a grounding element when you move. Like, I tell my parents all the time now how grateful I am that we moved when we did, because although it's brought up a whole host of, complications.
Sure.
The fact that I was able to go home from high school every day to a home that was not fundamentally different from the one that I had in India was just incredibly valuable, and I only realize how valuable that was the older I get.
Sure.
I wasn't just thrown into that small Midwestern college straight away all by myself.
Right, of course.
And when you're wrestling with all of these identities, family and your identity as a for me a daughter, for her a mother and a spouse, feel like the simpler ones to cling to. And I mean, it sort of, it becomes important to you that, like, this, when everything else is changing, at least this, my tiny little family unit, is kind of the same.
Yeah, absolutely. There is, so I made all of my, I said I made all of my notes, and I remember there was one line that I think for me is, I think, where I am right now in figuring out sort of identity, and I think she talks about it so cohesively. Yes, when we excavate the earth, what do we bring from the past into our future? How do sediments connect us to our earlier selves, our heritage, our conflicts and rifts, our disrupted families? And I think I feel really comfortable here now. I think I have my dear, wonderful friends, and I have a community, and a semblance of a career. But I think still sifting through the earth of my previous lives, right? Like who I was when I was in college, who I was when I was a kid, the things that have up until this point shaped me. It's like, what do we carry with us? What do we get rid of? What do we choose to take into our future? And I think I'm still figuring out what that is for me.
Yeah.
Which is just, no one tells you how hard adulthood is.
Nobody ever does.
And I don't think, it's something else that she said at one point was, how will you, it's something about how hard life is, and that you don't know until you're in it. And that once you're in it, you have to get through it, and how will you choose to do that? Yes. I think about that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's actually, that I will find, because I think that's the first thing that I underlined. That was that moment that made me stop and get up.
And get your pencil.
And get my pencil. Is how can we know what is hard until we are in the pain of it, and once there, how do we confront the truth?
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, thematically, everything you said is true. But this is also what I love so much about the writing of this book, and the line about the earth that you mentioned before, is this sort of fuzziness of meaning. Because I was just rereading that essay in which the line about the earth is, and she's actually looking at pictures of like rocky landscapes at the Pakistani consulate embassy, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so it's both, yes, metaphorical earth of our past and things we've buried and all of that, but it's also these actual physical landscapes. Mm-hmm. And I think what struck me most about this line was when we say hard, we think difficult.
Right.
But then when you go from how can we know what is hard until we are in the pain of it, like it makes that hardness something physical.
Yeah.
And it's just like that sort of duality and fuzziness that I love.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that I literally laughed out loud when I read was her talking about seeing her sister. And I didn't read the whole thing. Can I borrow the book?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So neither of us asked, "Why did you leave me?" or "Why have you taken so long to visit?" Neither of us said, "I resent looking after our mother," or "I feel angry that your husband took you far away from me." Instead, we hissed, "You're just like mother," an insult we should never shake out of its box. Once out, the space between us became 5 months of almost silence, punctured by occasional emails and stubbornness. For a time, that felt like the greatest distance. And I have an older sister. We're 5.5 years apart. And we both love our mother desperately. I want to preface this by saying that. But I do think that there are those times when the worst possible insult we could throw at each other was, "You're just like mom." That specificity. When you have a sister, and I think two women having sisters, you deal with that, right? It's a very specific relationship compared to a sister and a brother or two brothers. And it is, I think, that the tension of when one goes and one stays. And my sister is home, she's in Philadelphia, and there are times when my mom has been sick and she's had to be there for my mom. And my mom's mom is my only grandparent that's still alive, and my mom has to take care of her. And there is that sense of like, I am here, I'm 900 miles away, there's nothing I can do. And there's the guilt that I feel of that, but also the freedom I have with that. And I like, that was one of those many experiences where our lives are so completely different, but we could connect on that very specific thing, and it was a universal thing. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, my mom also loved this book. I lent it to her and she loved it, and for many of the same reasons that I did, but I think she connected to the motherhood side of it more.
Sure.
As well as that Toni's relationship with her mom, because I believe you know this, but months, like 2 months, maybe less than that, after we moved here, my grandmother, my mom's mom, was diagnosed with breast cancer.
I remember you telling me that, yeah.
And my mom felt so much guilt.
Yeah.
I mean, she went back almost immediately because fortunately we were able to afford an air ticket just after moving.
Sure.
But the fact that, we'd been 10 minutes away for 13 years, and then the minute we leave, this happens.
I can remember my dad's mom was in okay health when we moved here, but I remember right before we moved, she was living in like a retirement community. I'd called her and she said, "You better come see me before you go." And it was kind of a joke, right? Like, how dare you think about leaving without seeing me? And then when we saw her health wasn't as good as I thought it was. And when we said goodbye, I just had this feeling. And we moved here in September of 2015, and she died in December, right before we would have come home. And I can remember when she died, it was like, well, I can afford to come home for the funeral, or I can afford to come home for Christmas. And so it was like, I'm probably not going to make the funeral. And my mom was fine with that. She understood, you know, it's at that point, the funeral is not for the person who's gone. They're gone. It's for the people who are left. And then my dad's younger brother, my Uncle John, found out that I wasn't coming, and he got me a plane ticket so I could go. But yeah, like that guilt of there's nothing I can do. I'm here. I have to be here. That I think, especially in my family, so much of my family still lives in that area, Philadelphia. And so the idea of leaving to go so far away was kind of foreign. I was sort of the first one in my extended family to really go very far away for school. I mean, not my extended family, but my immediate family. My mom and dad didn't finish college, and my sister did online college. And so it was, when I went away, it was a big deal. And then coming here again, I'm my own separate island now of Chicago.
It always makes those goodbyes a little more poignant and a little more resonant. Every time they happen as well, because especially once something like that happens, you always think every time, is this going to be the last time I see this person?
Something that I think you had mentioned is just the themes for the book, and I feel like we've talked about family, talked about immigration, about identity, but then there's also this gardening piece, which is just what I love is, you know, I am not a gardener. I have the blackest thumb I've ever seen. No.
Yeah.
Part of what I love about it is the connection it has to her mom. And there's that point when she talks about her garden compared to her mother's garden. I think it's the section with the squirrels.
Or maybe the roses.
Yes. But I just loved that parallel of like, these are my poor things floundering in Midwestern winter, and I can picture my mom in the opposite season with her beautiful roses in bloom in the warm New Zealand weather.
Yes. It's beautiful, first of all. I mean, I love a good description of gardening, even if I cannot garden to save my life.
No.
But it's also one of the things that I keep forgetting about this book, probably because I connect more to the other themes we've talked about.
Yeah.
But the gardening is one of those beautifully specific things about this book. And we talk about universality so much, and it's so easy to look at a book like this and say, oh, she's such a unique person from such a unique family, and yet this book is so universal, and that's so amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean, this book is great. I love it. But it's the specifics. It's that choice of gardening, along with all of these other things, that make it universal. I mean, universality doesn't just come from making grand statements about immigration and life.
Right.
Like, it comes from the more specifics you have, the more there is for more people to connect to.
Right.
And that is another thing I love about this book.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for being with me today. I always love talking with you about books.
Feelings mutual.
And about this one in particular.
Yes.
If you have thoughts, questions about what we've talked about today, please feel free to leave them in the comments. We really want to start a conversation with everyone about books, about literature, about this book in particular, other books you've read that are similar to this one. I'm going to link Toni's work in the description below, as well as the other things that we've talked about today, so that make sure you check all of that out. And as always, like, comment, subscribe, join us on this journey we're taking together. Have a great day, friends.